I did a monologue about the Sound of Freedom not that long ago, but there's been some very troubling developments with the leadership of the organization that was behind it, specifically Tim Ballard. Let's go and put this up there on the screen. So Tim Ballard has now had to depart the Operation Underground Railroad after a sexual misconduct investigation internally. They said, quote, "Our has dedicated to combating sexual abuse and does not tolerate sexual harassment or discrimination by anyone inside of the organization." So what they said is that while Tim Ballard allegedly is preparing for a Senate run, Krystal, he, quote, has invited women to act as, quote, his wife on undercover missions which were aimed at rescuing victims of sex trafficking. He would then, quote, allegedly coerce these women into sharing a bed or to showering together, claiming it was necessary to fool traffickers. So obviously that's incredibly creepy behavior. They're believed, quote, to be higher than 7 in terms of the number of women that would account for some employees who were coerced into this. And, you know, the organization itself has distanced himself. They said, quote, "He is permanently separated from the organization. We're dedicated to combating sexual abuse. We've retained an independent law firm to conduct a comprehensive investigation to all the relevant allegations." What I actually thought was most noteworthy was the Mormon Church weighing in. Let's put this up there on the screen. The Church of Latter-day Saints actually denounced many of the claims made by Tim Ballard, saying, quote, his activities were morally unacceptable and that they had betrayed the French. This was after a previous allegation about how he had been betrayed and how the president of a church has had his name used in terms of Tim's, quote, personal or financial interests. It's pretty rare to see the Mormon Church actually come out and basically disavow and denounce the claims which were made that basically that the church was standing by him. As I said, the backdrop of all this is he wants to run for Senate in Utah. And then at the same time, with other things dropping, let's put this up there on the screen, one of the producers behind the film, quote, held an allegedly underage trafficking victim's breast and was found during an investigation for sexual misconduct during one of these investigations and or trips that were made to go into rescue victims of human trafficking. So some contrary behavior to what was shown in the film, Krystal, I think, to say the least.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And listen, to be clear, Tim Ballard denies everything.
Denies the allegations.
Says he did nothing wrong, that they had really strict guidelines in place, et cetera, et cetera. But you now have a lot of women who, you know, effectively said very similar behavior that they experienced. There was a letter that was going around throughout the Utah philanthropic community, basically warning about this HR investigation that was occurring within his own organization, which again, he has now been forced out of,
right,
into these sexual harassment allegations. Part of what the letter said is it was ultimately revealed through disturbingly specific and parallel accounts that Tim has been deceitfully and extensively grooming and manipulating multiple women for the past few years with the ultimate intent of coercing them to participate in sexual acts with him under the premise of going where it takes and doing whatever it takes to save a child. So the allegation here is that effectively he would use these women's real concern about trafficking victims and say, well, you know, how far would you go to make sure that these kids are okay? Well, I guess you have to, you know, sleep in the bed with me. I guess you have to shower with me. I guess you have to pretend you're my wife for this trip. Those are the allegations. And I think, you know, the fact that he was pushed out of his own organization says something. And there is a long documented track record of him being caught in overt lies about some of the work that his organization has done, including, you know, things that he has told Congress about specific trafficking survivors, the details of which he made up, the involvement of his organization with these trafficking survivors. He also invented and embellished. So there were some red flags about this dude already, even in advance of these allegations. And then the other thing that, you know, within the world of organizations that are genuinely working to combat human trafficking, there were a lot of questions about their tactics. And that ties into the other allegations about this executive producer and how he ends up, you know, groping this maybe
allegedly,
underage, potentially underage 16-year-old, potentially sex trafficking victim. is the other organizations say, listen, part of what you're doing here is you're actually creating more demand for sex trafficking, and in particular underage sex trafficking victims, by going into these communities and the tactics that you're using. So there were a lot of red flags. That doesn't mean you can't like the movie. That doesn't mean that you can't really support the core underlying mission. But just in terms of these particular individuals being heroes, a lot of problems.
I think that's the key point, right? Which is that the movie was popular for a reason. It was actually one of the biggest films in South America as well. Like, a lot of people, the idea behind it really resonated in terms of a problem, probably, which is very present, but that the people behind it, people behind it at the very least have not conducted themselves in the most professional manner, regardless of whether it's true or not. And I actually think that's a shame for the organization. And unfortunately, I've seen a lot of people be like, this is a witch hunt and all of that. And I'm like, listen, you read these are people who were in the organization, who agreed with the cause, who, it's like, they're not like liberals
who
or something
agreed
like
so much that they were on these trips.
Exactly, who were on the trips, who were involved. The Church of Latter-day, like the freaking Mormon, you're accusing them of being like liars and working against. Yeah, it's like, what are we talking about here? Anyway, let's all just be honest. Let's have a discussion, especially because I know that the film resonated with so many people. That doesn't mean, though, that it's all about real life. So important to always keep that in mind, and we'll see you guys later.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.